Marcus Williams stepped off the bus with his worn backpack slung over one shoulder, staring up at the towering iron gates of Westbridge Academy. The prestigious music school looked like something from a movie, with its stone columns and perfectly trimmed hedges. His mother had worked 3 jobs just to afford the application fee, and when the acceptance letter arrived, she had cried tears of joy for an entire evening. Marcus knew this opportunity was bigger than just him. It was for his whole family, his whole neighborhood. The 14-year-old boy walked through the courtyard, noticing how the other students looked at him. Their eyes lingered a moment too long on his patched jacket and scuffed sneakers. Most kids here arrived in expensive cars carrying instrument cases that probably cost more than his family's monthly rent. Marcus clutched the strap of his bag tighter, reminding himself why he was here. Music was his language, the one thing that made sense when everything else felt confusing. Inside the main building, the hallways smelled like old wood and lemon polish. Portraits of famous musicians lined the walls, their stern faces seeming to judge everyone who passed beneath them. Marcus found his way to the administration office, where a secretary with silver hair and thin glasses barely glanced up at him. She slid a stack of papers across the desk without a smile, pointing toward a waiting area with seats that looked too fancy to actually sit on. While Marcus filled out forms, he heard footsteps approaching. A tall man in an expensive suit walked past, then stopped and turned around. This was Headmaster Richard Pemberton, though Marcus did not know it yet. The man's eyes swept over Marcus from head to toe, his lips pressing into a thin line of disapproval. He leaned toward the secretary and whispered something that made her glance at Marcus with a knowing look. Headmaster Pemberton cleared his throat loudly. Marcus looked up from his paperwork, meeting the man's cold gray eyes. The headmaster's voice was smooth but carried an edge of superiority that made Marcus's stomach tighten. He asked if Marcus was lost, perhaps looking for the community center down the street. The secretary stifled a laugh behind her hand. Marcus felt heat rising to his cheeks but kept his voice steady as he explained he was a new student, starting today. The headmaster's eyebrows lifted in exaggerated surprise. He made a show of checking his clipboard, running his finger down the list of names as if searching for proof that some terrible mistake had been made. When he found Marcus's name, his expression soured further. He mentioned the scholarship program with barely concealed disdain, suggesting that sometimes the academy felt pressured to accept students who might not quite fit the institution's standards. Marcus wanted to respond, to defend himself, but the words stuck in his throat. He had faced doubt before, but never from someone in a position of power like this. The headmaster continued, saying that Westbridge Academy had a reputation to uphold, built over 150 years of excellence. He hoped that all students, regardless of their background, would respect the traditions and not disrupt the learning environment for those who truly belonged. The secretary handed Marcus his schedule and a map of the campus. The headmaster glanced at the paper and made another comment about hoping Marcus could read music notation, since they did not have time to teach basics here. He walked away with his shoes clicking against the marble floor, leaving Marcus standing in the hallway feeling smaller than he had in years. Marcus found his first class, music theory, in a sunlit room filled with wooden desks. The other students were already seated, chatting easily with each other about summer vacations in Europe and private lessons with famous musicians. When Marcus entered, the conversation stopped. He took a seat near the back, trying to make himself invisible. The theory class was challenging but familiar. Marcus had learned to read music from YouTube videos and library books, teaching himself during late nights after his mother came home exhausted from work. He could follow the lesson easily, but he did not raise his hand to answer questions. He did not want to draw attention, did not want to give anyone a reason to think he did not belong. Lunchtime was worse. The cafeteria was enormous, with chandeliers hanging from the ceiling and tables that looked like they belonged in a fancy restaurant. Marcus bought a simple sandwich with the lunch voucher included in his scholarship, while other students ordered elaborate meals without checking prices. He sat alone at a corner table, watching groups of friends laugh together, their easy confidence something he could not imagine feeling. A blonde girl named Stephanie walked past with her friends, their designer clothes and perfect hair making them look like they had stepped out of a magazine. One of them pointed at Marcus and whispered something that made the others giggle. Stephanie glanced over her shoulder at him, her expression a mixture of curiosity and pity. Marcus pretended not to notice, focusing on his sandwich even though he had lost his appetite. The afternoon brought his first real test. All new students were required to perform a piece on their primary instrument for evaluation. Marcus's heart pounded as he followed the other students to the performance hall. The room was breathtaking, with rows of velvet seats and a stage that seemed impossibly large. A beautiful grand piano sat in the center, its black surface gleaming under the stage lights. Several students performed before Marcus. A violinist played something complex and technical. A cellist performed a piece that brought tears to the instructor's eyes. Each performance was met with polite applause and encouraging comments from the evaluation panel. Marcus's hands grew sweaty as his turn approached. He had never played on a piano this expensive, had never performed for an audience like this. When his name was called, Marcus walked to the stage on shaky legs. The piano bench felt foreign beneath him, too perfect and pristine. He placed his fingers on the keys, and for a moment doubt flooded his mind. What if he froze? What if he proved the headmaster right? What if he embarrassed himself and his mother and everyone who believed in him? But then his fingers moved, almost of their own accord, and the first notes filled the hall. The familiar melody washed away his fear, replacing it with the pure joy he always felt when playing. Music was home no matter where he was or who was watching. Marcus closed his eyes and let the piano speak for him, telling a story that words could never capture, proving that talent had nothing to do with the price of your shoes or the size of your house. The melody Marcus chose was one he had discovered in a dusty book at the public library 2 years ago. It was a piece by a lesser-known composer, not flashy or technically overwhelming, but filled with emotion that required real understanding to play correctly. His fingers danced across the keys with a confidence he did not feel inside, each note connecting to the next like words in a sentence only he could write. The evaluation panel sat forward in their seats. 3 instructors who had looked bored during most of the performances now wore expressions of genuine interest. Marcus could feel the shift in the room's atmosphere, the way silence had weight when people were truly listening, rather than just waiting for something to end. He poured everything into the music. Every lonely afternoon practicing on the old keyboard in his tiny bedroom, every moment of doubt, every dream he barely dared to speak out loud. When the final note faded, the hall remained silent for several heartbeats. Marcus opened his eyes, suddenly terrified that he had made some terrible mistake. But then the applause began, hesitant at first, then building into something genuine. The students in the audience were clapping, some of them looking surprised by their own reaction. The panel members were nodding to each other, writing notes on their evaluation forms. Dr. Catherine Rosewood, the head of the piano department, stood up. She was an older woman with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her voice carried clearly through the hall as she asked Marcus where he had studied before. He explained about the library books and online tutorials, about the old keyboard with broken keys that he had learned to work around. Dr. Rosewood's expression softened, and she exchanged glances with her fellow panelists. Just as Marcus began to feel hopeful, a door at the back of the hall opened. Headmaster Pemberton strode down the center aisle, his expression dark. He had heard the applause from his office and come to investigate what was causing such a disruption. The headmaster stepped onto the stage, positioning himself between Marcus and the panel. His voice dripped with condescension as he addressed the room. Pemberton announced that while the performance was adequate for someone with limited training, everyone needed to remember that Westbridge Academy had standards. He gestured toward Marcus dismissively, suggesting that natural talent without proper instruction was like a wild plant, messy and unrefined. True musicianship required breeding, he said, years of private lessons and cultural exposure that could not be rushed or imitated. Marcus felt his face burning. Several students in the audience laughed nervously, unsure if the headmaster was joking or serious. Pemberton continued, saying that the scholarship program was experimental and that he had expressed concerns from the beginning. He looked directly at Marcus and asked if he understood the level of dedication required here, implying that students from certain backgrounds often lacked the discipline for serious study. Dr. Rosewood stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Her voice was sharp as she interrupted the headmaster, something that clearly shocked everyone present. She stated firmly that what they had just witnessed was exceptional musicianship, regardless of the student's background. The technical execution was flawless, but more importantly, the emotional interpretation showed maturity beyond his years. That kind of talent, she said pointedly, could not be bought with private lessons. The tension in the hall was thick enough to cut. Headmaster Pemberton's face reddened, his jaw clenching visibly. He reminded Dr. Rosewood that he was responsible for the academy's reputation and that every student reflected on the institution. Before she could respond, another panel member, a younger man named Professor Chen, spoke up. He mentioned that Marcus had played from memory, something none of the other students had attempted, and that his dynamics showed sophisticated understanding of the piece's structure. Pemberton waved away their comments with an irritated gesture. He announced that Marcus would be placed in the beginner's piano class, despite the performance they had just witnessed. It was important, he said, to ensure proper foundation before advancing. Dr. Rosewood objected immediately, calling the decision absurd, but the headmaster cut her off. His word was final, he declared, and the faculty would do well to remember the hierarchy. Marcus stood frozen on stage, humiliation washing over him in waves. The message was clear. No matter how well he played, he would not be treated fairly here. The headmaster dismissed everyone, and students filed out in uncomfortable silence. Several glanced back at Marcus with expressions ranging from sympathy to relief that they were not in his position. Dr. Rosewood approached Marcus as he stepped down from the stage. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and spoke quietly so only he could hear. She apologized for what had just happened and assured him that not everyone at the academy shared the headmaster's views. She promised to work on getting him moved to the appropriate class level and encouraged him not to let this discourage him. Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. He wanted to thank her but was afraid he might cry if he tried to speak. Dr. Rosewood seemed to understand. She squeezed his shoulder once more before leaving to argue further with Pemberton, her heels clicking angrily against the floor as she marched toward his office. In the hallway outside the performance hall, Marcus leaned against the cool wall, trying to steady his breathing. A group of students passed by and he overheard them talking about his performance. Some were impressed, calling it incredible. Others repeated the headmaster's words about natural talent being unrefined, as if they had already forgotten what they had heard with their own ears. Stephanie, the blonde girl from lunch, walked by with her friends. She slowed down, looking at Marcus with an expression he could not quite read. For a moment he thought she might say something, but her friends pulled her along, giggling about something unrelated. Marcus watched them disappear around the corner, feeling more alone than he had since arriving that morning. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Marcus attended classes where he was simultaneously invisible and too visible. Teachers called on other students but skipped over him. When he did speak, his answers were met with surprise, as if they had not expected him to know anything. By the time the final bell rang, Marcus was exhausted from the constant tension. He walked to the bus stop slowly, dragging his feet. The weight of the day pressed down on his shoulders. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother asking how the first day went. Marcus stared at the screen, his thumbs hovering over the keyboard. How could he tell her about the headmaster's cruelty? About feeling unwelcome in a place she had sacrificed so much to get him into? Instead, he typed a simple message saying it was fine, that the school was big and beautiful. She sent back a string of excited emojis and told him she knew he would make her proud. Marcus swallowed the lump in his throat and put his phone away. He would not disappoint her, no matter what the headmaster thought of him. As the bus pulled up, Marcus glanced back at Westbridge Academy. The building looked imposing in the late afternoon light, its windows reflecting the sunset like judgmental eyes. He climbed onto the bus and found a seat in the back, already dreading tomorrow. But beneath the exhaustion and humiliation, something else burned quietly. Determination. The headmaster had tried to diminish him, but Marcus's music had spoken louder than words. That performance had been real, and everyone in that hall had heard it. The beginner's piano class was held in a cramped practice room that smelled like dust and old sheet music. Marcus arrived early, hoping to avoid attention, and found himself surrounded by students who were genuinely struggling with basic concepts. The instructor, Mrs. Henderson, was a tired-looking woman in her 50s who seemed surprised to see him there. She glanced at her roster several times, clearly confused about why someone who had performed so beautifully was placed in her introductory class. During the lesson, Marcus sat quietly while Mrs. Henderson explained proper hand position and basic scales. The other students in the class were mostly freshmen who had chosen piano as a secondary instrument, and some of them could barely read sheet music. Marcus felt like he was wasting precious time, but he did not complain. He completed the simple exercises perfectly, drawing curious looks from his classmates who wondered why he was there. After class, Mrs. Henderson asked Marcus to stay behind. She closed the door gently and sat on the piano bench, gesturing for him to sit beside her. Her voice was kind as she said she had heard about his evaluation performance from other teachers. She admitted she did not understand the placement decision, but promised to advocate for his transfer to an advanced class. Until then, she encouraged him to use the practice rooms whenever possible to work on more challenging pieces. Marcus thanked her, feeling grateful for her kindness. She pulled out a key from her desk drawer and handed it to him, explaining it would give him access to practice room 7 during lunch and after school. It was one of the better rooms, she said with a wink, with a decent piano and soundproofing. Marcus's eyes widened at the gesture. Having a space to play freely felt like receiving a treasure. Word about Marcus's performance had spread through the student body faster than he expected. By his third day at Westbridge, students he had never met knew his name. Some regarded him with curiosity, others with skepticism. A few approached him between classes to ask about his background, their questions friendly but tinged with disbelief that someone like him could play so well. The advanced piano students were a different story. They saw Marcus as an oddity, a fluke. During lunch, he overheard a group of them discussing his performance. A boy named Preston, whose father was a famous conductor, insisted that Marcus had probably memorized one impressive piece without truly understanding music theory. His friends agreed, saying technical skill without proper education was meaningless at the professional level. Marcus wanted to challenge them, to prove he understood music theory better than they assumed, but confrontation was not in his nature. Instead, he spent his lunch periods in practice room 7, losing himself in music that was far beyond the beginner curriculum. He worked through challenging Chopin etudes and complex Bach fugues, pieces that pushed his abilities and allowed him to forget, temporarily, the hostile environment outside. Dr. Rosewood kept her promise to fight for Marcus's class placement. She scheduled meetings with Headmaster Pemberton, submitting formal requests and evaluation reports that clearly demonstrated Marcus deserved to be in advanced classes. Each time, Pemberton found new excuses to deny the transfer. He cited policy concerns, integration timelines, and the need for proper foundation building, though everyone knew these were just obstacles designed to keep Marcus down. During one particularly frustrating week, Marcus arrived at practice room 7 to find someone already inside. Through the small window in the door, he saw Stephanie sitting at the piano playing a melancholic melody. She was not aware anyone was watching, and her guard was completely down. The music she played was beautiful but sad, revealing an emotional depth Marcus had not expected from someone who seemed so confident and privileged. He knocked softly before entering. Stephanie jumped, startled, her hands flying off the keys. She looked embarrassed, quickly gathering her sheet music as if she had been caught doing something wrong. Marcus apologized for interrupting, but she shook her head, saying she was just leaving. As she moved toward the door, she paused and turned back to him. Stephanie's voice was quieter than he had heard before. She mentioned that she had been in the audience during his evaluation performance. Marcus waited, expecting criticism or another reminder that he did not belong. Instead, she said it was the most beautiful piano playing she had ever heard in person. Her honesty surprised him. She explained that most students at Westbridge, including herself, were technically proficient but lacked the emotional connection he brought to music. Before Marcus could respond, Stephanie's phone buzzed with messages from her friends. Her expression shifted, the vulnerability disappearing behind a practiced smile. She said she had to go but suggested he should keep fighting for the class placement he deserved. Then she was gone, leaving Marcus alone with questions swirling in his mind about who she really was beneath the surface. The encounter with Stephanie stayed with Marcus throughout the week. He noticed her more now, observed how she acted differently around her friends than she did alone. In the cafeteria, she laughed loudly at jokes that did not seem funny, and agreed with opinions she looked uncomfortable expressing. In the hallways between classes, she maintained perfect posture and a carefully neutral expression, as if she were always being watched and judged. Meanwhile, Headmaster Pemberton seemed determined to make Marcus's life difficult. He implemented a new policy requiring scholarship students to participate in additional study sessions, ostensibly to help them catch up with their more privileged peers. The sessions were scheduled during the times Marcus usually had access to practice room 7, effectively cutting his practice time in half. Dr. Rosewood was furious when she learned about the policy. She confronted Pemberton in the faculty lounge, her voice loud enough that students passing in the hallway could hear. She accused him of targeting Marcus specifically, of using his position to punish a talented student for the crime of being different. Pemberton remained calm, insisting the policy applied to all scholarship students and was designed to ensure their success. But Marcus was the only scholarship student in the music program that semester. The policy's true target was obvious to everyone, yet no one had the power to challenge the headmaster's authority directly. Faculty members sympathetic to Marcus offered support in small ways, extra resources here, words of encouragement there, but none could overturn Pemberton's decisions. During one of the mandatory study sessions, Marcus sat in the library with a tutor assigned to help him with music history. The tutor, a graduate student named James, seemed uncomfortable with the arrangement. He admitted quietly that Marcus clearly did not need these sessions, that his knowledge of music history was more comprehensive than many advanced students. James promised to make the time useful by recommending books and recordings that could deepen Marcus's understanding further. As weeks passed, Marcus developed a quiet resilience. He attended the beginner class without complaint, completed the mandatory study sessions, and found creative ways to practice despite the obstacles. Early mornings before school started became his secret time, when he could slip into practice room 7 and work through difficult pieces. While the building was still mostly empty, his dedication did not go unnoticed. Mrs. Henderson regularly praised his progress in beginner's class, though both knew the praise was meaningless given his actual skill level. Dr. Rosewood checked on him frequently, her frustration with the administration visible in her tight expressions and terse comments about bureaucracy. Even Professor Chen made a point of acknowledging Marcus in the hallways, asking about his practice and offering advice on technique. But the person Marcus thought about most was Stephanie. After their conversation in the practice room, she had started nodding to him in the hallways, small gestures of acknowledgement that her friends did not seem to notice. Sometimes he caught her watching him during lunch, her expression thoughtful and distant. He wondered what she was thinking, whether she understood what it felt like to pretend to be someone you were not. The annual Westbridge Academy Winter Showcase was announced 6 weeks before the event. It was the most prestigious performance of the school year, where selected students performed for an audience of wealthy donors, alumni, and influential people in the classical music world. Being chosen to perform was considered a tremendous honor that could open doors to scholarships, conservatory programs, and professional opportunities. Dr. Rosewood immediately submitted Marcus's name for consideration, along with detailed documentation of his abilities. She included recordings of his practice sessions that clearly demonstrated his technical mastery and artistic maturity. Several other faculty members added their endorsements, creating a compelling case for his inclusion. The selection committee was composed of senior faculty, but Headmaster Pemberton held the final approval on all performers. When the preliminary list of performers was posted, Marcus's name was absent. Students and faculty members crowded around the bulletin board, scanning the names with various reactions. Preston and his friends celebrated their selections, already discussing what pieces they would perform. Stephanie's name was there too, though she looked less excited than expected. Marcus stood at the back of the crowd, his heart sinking as he confirmed what he had suspected. Dr. Rosewood was livid. She stormed into Pemberton's office without an appointment, her voice echoing through the administrative wing. Marcus happened to be passing by to drop off paperwork and could hear the heated argument through the heavy door. Dr. Rosewood demanded an explanation for Marcus's exclusion, listing his qualifications and the support from multiple faculty members. Pemberton's response was measured but firm, citing concerns about consistency and the importance of following traditional advancement pathways. The argument escalated until Dr. Rosewood emerged from the office, her face flushed with anger. She spotted Marcus in the hallway and her expression softened immediately. She approached him, speaking quietly despite her obvious frustration. She promised this was not over, that she would appeal to the board of trustees if necessary. Marcus thanked her, though he felt numb. Part of him had expected this outcome, but expecting disappointment did not make it hurt less. Over the next few days, something unexpected happened. Several students began questioning the showcase selection openly. A violinist named Amy posted on the school's social media page asking why the most talented pianist she had heard at Westbridge was not performing. Others added comments supporting her observation. Even some of Preston's friends admitted privately that Marcus's exclusion seemed unfair, though they were careful not to say so publicly. Stephanie surprised everyone, including herself, by speaking up during a student council meeting. She pointed out that the winter showcase was supposed to represent the Academy's best talent, and excluding Marcus made the selection process look biased rather than merit-based. Her comments created an uncomfortable silence. The student council president, a senior whose family had donated millions to the school, quickly changed the subject, but the question had been raised. Headmaster Pemberton called a special assembly to address what he called rumors and misunderstandings about the showcase selection. He stood at the podium in the main auditorium, his voice carrying the authority of decades in academia. He explained that selection for the showcase required more than just technical ability. Students needed to demonstrate commitment to the Academy's values, proper training progression, and an understanding of tradition. He never mentioned Marcus by name, but everyone knew exactly who he was talking about. Marcus sat in the audience, feeling hundreds of eyes glancing in his direction. He kept his face neutral, refusing to give Pemberton the satisfaction of seeing him hurt. But inside, anger was building alongside the pain. The headmaster was essentially saying that no matter how well Marcus played, his background disqualified him from recognition. The message was clear. Some students would always be outsiders regardless of their talent. After the assembly, Marcus went straight to practice room 7. He needed to play, to lose himself in music that did not judge or exclude. He started with scales, working through them mechanically until his fingers felt loose and warm. Then he moved into a Rachmaninoff prelude, one of the most technically demanding pieces in his repertoire. His hands flew across the keys with controlled fury, each note perfectly executed but charged with emotion. He did not hear the door open. Dr. Rosewood entered quietly, standing near the back of the small room. She waited until he finished the piece before speaking. Her voice was gentle but determined as she made Marcus an offer. She had connections with the regional youth orchestra, whose director owed her several favors. She could arrange for Marcus to perform at their upcoming concert, giving him the exposure and opportunity that Westbridge was denying him. Marcus turned on the piano bench, hope and suspicion warring in his expression. He asked if accepting outside performance opportunities would cause problems with the Academy. Dr. Rosewood's smile was thin and sharp. She said the Academy had no policy against students pursuing external opportunities, and if Pemberton tried to create problems, she would relish the fight. Besides, she added, it was time people outside Westbridge discovered Marcus's talent. Over the following weeks, Marcus practiced with renewed purpose. He was preparing 2 pieces for the youth orchestra concert, the Rachmaninoff prelude and a more contemporary composition that showcased different aspects of his musicality. Dr. Rosewood arranged for him to use the best practice room in the school during evening hours, a space usually reserved for graduate students and visiting artists. News of Marcus's upcoming performance spread through the Academy. Some students were genuinely excited for him, seeing it as a victory against unfair treatment. Others viewed it as confirmation that Marcus was going around proper channels, rather than earning his place through established procedures. Preston made snide comments about external performances being participation trophies compared to the prestigious Westbridge showcase. Stephanie sought Marcus out one afternoon as he was leaving practice. She asked about the youth orchestra performance, her interest seeming genuine rather than polite. Marcus found himself telling her about the pieces he was preparing, about his nervousness and excitement. She listened attentively, then shared that she was unhappy with her own showcase selection. Her father had chosen her piece, a safe classical selection that showed technique but no personality. Their conversation revealed unexpected common ground. Both felt trapped by expectations, though from opposite directions. Marcus was held back by prejudice that assumed he was less capable. Stephanie was pushed forward by privilege that demanded she succeed without taking risks. She admitted that watching Marcus fight for recognition had made her question why she never fought for anything herself, why she always took the path of least resistance. The discussion was interrupted by Stephanie's friends calling for her. She rolled her eyes slightly, a genuine expression of frustration, before saying goodbye to Marcus. But something had shifted between them. They were no longer just the scholarship student and the rich girl. They were two people who understood, at least partially, what it meant to feel misunderstood. As the youth orchestra concert approached, Marcus's anxiety increased. This performance felt more significant than his evaluation showcase. It was his chance to prove that Pemberton's judgment was wrong, that excellence could not be determined by someone's background or bank account. Dr. Rosewood helped him refine his interpretation, offering suggestions that elevated his playing from technically excellent to genuinely moving. The night before the concert, Marcus stayed late in the practice room, working through the pieces one final time. His fingers knew every note, every dynamic change, every subtle shift in tempo. But he wanted more than technical perfection. He wanted to communicate something real, to make the audience feel what he felt when he discovered these pieces. As he played through the Rachmaninoff, Marcus thought about his journey to this moment. The library books and YouTube tutorials, his mother's sacrifices, the long bus rides to Westbridge, the humiliation of Pemberton's treatment, the unexpected support from faculty and some students. All of it had led here, to this performance that felt like both an ending and a beginning. He finished the piece and sat in silence, his hands resting on the keys. Tomorrow would reveal whether his music could speak loudly enough to overcome the prejudice that tried to silence it. Marcus took a deep breath, closed the piano lid carefully, and headed home to rest. Whatever happened tomorrow, he would play his best and let the music tell his truth. The concert hall was much larger than Marcus had imagined. The regional youth orchestra performed in a renovated theater downtown, with ornate balconies and a ceiling painted with classical scenes. Marcus arrived 2 hours early for sound check, his stomach churning with nerves. The grand piano on stage looked magnificent under the stage lights, its polished surface reflecting the empty seats that would soon be filled with audience members. Dr. Rosewood met him backstage, carrying a garment bag with the suit she had arranged for him to borrow. It fit perfectly, transforming Marcus into someone who looked like he belonged on that stage. She adjusted his collar and stepped back, her eyes misty as she told him how proud she was. This performance was about more than music, she said. It was about showing the world what real talent looked like when given a proper chance to shine. Other youth orchestra members welcomed Marcus warmly. They were students from various schools in the region, united by their love of music rather than divided by social hierarchies. A cellist named David introduced himself and mentioned he had heard about Marcus from a friend at Westbridge. Word of the talented scholarship student facing discrimination had spread through the local music community, creating unexpected support and interest in tonight's performance. As the audience began filing in, Marcus peeked through the stage curtain. He spotted his mother in the third row, wearing her best dress and clutching her purse nervously. Seeing her there, knowing she had taken time off from work and traveled across the city, steadied his nerves. He was not just playing for himself tonight. He was playing for her, for everyone who had believed in him, and for everyone who had been told they did not belong. To Marcus's surprise, he noticed several familiar faces scattered throughout the audience. Mrs. Henderson from his beginner class sat near the front, waving excitedly when she spotted him. Professor Chen was there with his wife, and even James, his music history tutor, had come. Most surprising was Stephanie, sitting in the balcony away from the main crowd, her presence unexpected and meaningful in ways Marcus did not have time to analyze. The concert began with the full orchestra performing 2 pieces. Marcus watched from backstage, using their performance to calm his breathing and focus his mind. The orchestra was talented, their unity and precision impressive. When the orchestra finished their second piece, the director introduced Marcus to the audience, explaining he was a special guest soloist from Westbridge Academy. Marcus walked onto the stage, the applause washing over him like a warm wave. He sat at the piano bench, adjusting his position until it felt right. The audience quieted. Hundreds of faces turned toward him expectantly. For a moment, doubt crept in. What if he froze? What if his fingers betrayed him? But then he placed his hands on the keys and remembered why he was here. The first piece was the contemporary composition, a flowing melody that built from gentle whispers to powerful crescendos. Marcus had connected with this piece immediately when Dr. Rosewood suggested it. The music told a story of struggle and hope, of darkness giving way to light. As he played, Marcus forgot about the audience, forgot about Westbridge and Headmaster Pemberton, forgot about everything except the conversation between his fingers and the piano. The piece ended with a delicate sequence that faded into silence. For a heartbeat, the hall remained quiet. Then the applause erupted, genuine and enthusiastic. Marcus stood and bowed, his heart racing. He caught his mother's eye and saw tears streaming down her face. She was clapping so hard her hands must have hurt, her expression radiating pure joy and pride. After a brief intermission, Marcus returned for the Rachmaninoff prelude. This was the piece he had played in anger and frustration, channeling his pain into something beautiful. Tonight he approached it differently. The anger was still there, but tempered with understanding. The music was not just about his struggle, but about every person who had ever been, underestimated or dismissed because of who they were, rather than what they could do. His fingers attacked the keys with controlled power, navigating the technically demanding passages with ease. But technical skill was not what made the performance special. It was the way Marcus shaped each phrase, the subtle dynamics that gave the music emotional depth, the perfect balance between precision and passion. He was not just playing notes on a page. He was speaking a language that transcended words, communicating directly with something deep inside each listener. The final notes resonated through the hall, Marcus's foot on the sustain pedal letting them linger before fading completely. The silence that followed felt sacred, as if the audience was afraid to break the spell. Then the applause began, not polite and measured, but thunderous and genuine. People stood from their seats, a standing ovation that started in the front rows and spread through the entire audience. Marcus stood and bowed, overwhelmed by the response. He looked up at the balcony and saw Stephanie on her feet, clapping with tears on her cheeks. He found his mother in the crowd, who was openly sobbing with happiness. Dr. Rosewood stood near the side of the stage, her face radiant with vindication. The orchestra director approached Marcus and shook his hand enthusiastically, whispering that performance was extraordinary. Backstage after the concert, Marcus was surrounded by well-wishers. His mother hugged him so tightly he could barely breathe, telling him over and over that his father would have been so proud. Dr. Rosewood introduced him to several people in the audience who worked in music education and professional performance. They handed Marcus business cards, encouraging him to contact them about summer programs and future opportunities. Professor Chen approached with genuine warmth, saying he had recorded the performance and planned to use it in his classes as an example of emotional maturity in playing. Mrs. Henderson was practically bouncing with excitement, declaring she always knew Marcus was special. Even some students from Westbridge who had attended congratulated him, their respect visible in their expressions and tone. The orchestra director pulled Marcus aside to make an offer. He wanted Marcus to perform with the youth orchestra again in the spring concert, this time as a featured soloist with full orchestral accompaniment. It was an opportunity usually reserved for much older students, but the director insisted Marcus's talent warranted exceptional treatment. Marcus accepted, his voice barely working past the lump in his throat. As the crowd thinned, Stephanie finally approached. She had waited until the others left, hanging back near the exit. Her usual confidence seemed diminished, replaced by something more genuine and vulnerable. She told Marcus his performance was the most beautiful thing she had ever heard. Then she admitted something that clearly cost her courage to say. She was tired of pretending, tired of performing a role that did not fit, tired of letting people like her father and the headmaster define who she should be. Marcus listened as Stephanie explained that watching him fight for recognition despite constant obstacles had inspired her to question her own choices. She had decided to withdraw from the Westbridge Winter Showcase. Instead of playing the safe piece her father selected, she wanted to spend the year developing her own voice as a musician, even if that meant disappointing people. She asked if Marcus would consider practicing together sometimes, helping each other grow as artists rather than competitors. The invitation surprised Marcus, but he agreed. Perhaps their unlikely friendship could become something that challenged the social hierarchies at Westbridge. As Stephanie left to find her driver, Marcus gathered his belongings and walked out with his mother. The night air was cold, but he barely felt it. The warmth of the performance still glowed inside him, a reminder that his music had power beyond anything Pemberton could diminish. On the bus ride home, Marcus's mother held his hand and talked about the future. She mentioned the business cards from the people Dr. Rosewood had introduced him to, the opportunities that seemed to be opening. Marcus listened but thought about something else. Tonight had proven that excellence could not be hidden or denied forever. Talent had its own voice, one that spoke clearly to anyone willing to listen. His phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Rosewood. She sent a photo someone had taken during his standing ovation, the image capturing the audience on their feet and Marcus at the piano, looking both amazed and humbled. Below the photo, she had written a simple message. "This is only the beginning. Keep fighting." Tomorrow would bring new challenges at Westbridge, but tonight, Marcus allowed himself to simply feel proud of what he had accomplished and hopeful about what might come next. Monday morning arrived with a heavy gray sky that matched Marcus's mood about returning to Westbridge. The triumph of the youth orchestra concert felt distant as he walked through the academy gates, bracing himself for whatever reception awaited. He wondered if anyone would mention the performance or if the school would pretend it had never happened. The answer came quickly. In the hallway before first period, Amy the violinist rushed up to him with her phone out. She showed him a review from the city newspaper's arts section. The critic had attended the youth orchestra concert and written a glowing paragraph about Marcus's performance, calling him a rising star with exceptional emotional depth and technical mastery. The review had been shared widely on social media, with many comments from local music lovers praising his talent. Word spread through Westbridge faster than Marcus could walk to his locker. Students he had never spoken to stopped him to offer congratulations. Some were genuinely happy for him, while others seemed curious about the student who had gained recognition outside the academy's carefully controlled system. By lunch, Marcus found himself surrounded by people asking about the performance, the youth orchestra, and his future plans. Not everyone's response was positive. Preston and his circle of advanced piano students gathered in their usual corner of the cafeteria, their expressions sour. Preston made loud comments about how external performances did not carry the same prestige as official academy showcases, implying Marcus had taken an easier path. His friends agreed, though their support sounded hollow even to themselves. The faculty room buzzed with discussion about the newspaper review. Dr. Rosewood made copies and distributed them to every music teacher. Her satisfaction barely concealed. Professor Chen displayed the review on his classroom bulletin board. Even Mrs. Henderson mentioned it during beginner piano class, her pride in Marcus evident despite the absurdity of him still being in her introductory course. Headmaster Pemberton remained conspicuously silent. He did not acknowledge the review, the performance, or the growing attention Marcus was receiving from the music community. During his weekly assembly address, he spoke about maintaining focus on internal achievements and not being distracted by external validation. Everyone understood the thinly veiled message, but it seemed petty rather than authoritative in light of Marcus's success. Stephanie kept her promise about withdrawing from the winter showcase. The announcement caused immediate controversy. Her father, a board member and major donor, called emergency meetings with Pemberton and other administrators. Stephanie stood firm, explaining she needed time to develop her own artistic voice rather than performing pieces selected to impress others. Her rebellion shocked the student body and gave courage to others who felt pressured into performances they did not connect with. She began joining Marcus in practice room 7 during lunch periods. At first, they worked separately, each focused on their own pieces. Gradually, they started sharing ideas, offering feedback, and discussing interpretation. Stephanie's technical skills were excellent, Marcus discovered, but she had been trained to play safely, hitting every note perfectly without taking emotional risks. Marcus encouraged her to experiment, to let mistakes happen in pursuit of genuine expression. Their growing friendship raised eyebrows among both their social circles. Stephanie's friends could not understand why she was spending time with the scholarship student, while some of Marcus's supporters worried she might be using him somehow. But both Marcus and Stephanie ignored the whispers. They had found something rare, a connection based on mutual respect and shared passion rather than social positioning. Dr. Rosewood made another attempt to have Marcus transferred to advanced classes. She submitted a new petition, this time including the newspaper review, testimonials from the youth orchestra director, and documentation of his work in practice sessions. Several other faculty members added their signatures, creating a formal request that was difficult to ignore. Pemberton delayed his response, citing the need for careful consideration. While waiting for the decision, Marcus received an unexpected invitation. A prestigious summer music intensive program at a well-known conservatory had heard about his performance through their connections with Dr. Rosewood. They offered him a full scholarship to attend their 6-week program, which typically cost thousands of dollars and attracted top young musicians from across the country. Acceptance into the program was highly competitive and considered a significant honor. Marcus shared the news with his mother, who cried happy tears while worrying about logistics. How would he get there? Where would he stay? What about his summer job that helped with family expenses? Dr. Rosewood worked with the conservatory to arrange everything. They would provide housing and meals, and the program included a small stipend for students who needed financial support. Every obstacle had a solution. When Marcus told his beginner piano class about the summer intensive, Mrs. Henderson applauded. She had been advocating behind the scenes for his class transfer and was frustrated by the lack of progress. She encouraged Marcus to accept the opportunity, saying sometimes you had to go where you were valued, rather than waiting for recognition from those determined not to see you. The news reached Pemberton's office through the faculty grapevine. The headmaster called Marcus in for a meeting, the first time they had spoken directly since the initial confrontation. Marcus sat across from Pemberton's imposing desk, maintaining eye contact despite his nervousness. The headmaster's tone was measured as he expressed concerns about Marcus participating in external programs that might conflict with Westbridge's curriculum. Marcus responded calmly, pointing out that the summer intensive occurred during school break and could only enhance his education. Pemberton shifted tactics, suggesting that Marcus seemed more interested in personal glory than contributing to the academy community. Marcus countered by mentioning his repeated attempts to join appropriate classes and participate in school performances, opportunities that had been denied to him. The tension in the office was thick. Pemberton studied Marcus with an expression that mixed frustration and something like grudging acknowledgement. The boy sitting across from him was not intimidated or defeated. If anything, external validation had strengthened Marcus's confidence. Pemberton dismissed him without approving or denying the summer program, but both knew the headmaster had no legitimate grounds to prevent Marcus from accepting. That evening, Marcus received a text from Stephanie asking him to meet her before school the next day. When he arrived at their agreed spot near the music wing, she looked nervous but determined. She explained that her father had threatened to withdraw his donations to Westbridge if Pemberton did not take action against what he called disruptive influences. Stephanie had overheard the conversation and realized her father was talking about Marcus and the students supporting him. Marcus felt his stomach drop. The last thing he wanted was to cause problems that might affect other people. Stephanie grabbed his arm, insisting he not take responsibility for her father's prejudice. She had decided to stand up to him, to make clear that she would not be used as leverage to hurt talented students. Her father's threats revealed exactly the kind of thinking that made Westbridge toxic for students like Marcus. The revelation troubled Marcus, but it also clarified something. The resistance he faced was not really about him personally. It was about maintaining systems of privilege that determined worth based on background rather than merit. Pemberton, Stephanie's father, and others like them were threatened by Marcus's success because it challenged their belief that excellence came from breeding and wealth rather than talent and hard work. Over the next week, an interesting shift occurred at Westbridge. More students began questioning the academy's selection processes and treatment of scholarship students. The student newspaper published an editorial about diversity and inclusion in the arts. Even some of Preston's friends privately approached Marcus to apologize for their earlier behavior, admitting they had been following Preston's lead without thinking critically. The pressure on Pemberton increased from multiple directions. Alumni who valued artistic merit over social pedigree contacted the administration to express support for Marcus. The youth orchestra director, who had influential connections, made calls praising Marcus and questioning why Westbridge was not showcasing such obvious talent. Dr. Rosewood and other faculty members maintained constant pressure through official channels. Finally, Pemberton called another meeting with Marcus, this time with Dr. Rosewood present. His expression was carefully neutral as he announced that Marcus would be transferred to advanced piano classes, effective immediately. The decision was framed as acknowledgement of his progress rather than admission of wrongdoing, but Marcus did not care about the spin. He was getting the opportunity he deserved. Dr. Rosewood could barely contain her smile. She had fought hard for this moment, and her persistence had paid off. As they left Pemberton's office, she squeezed Marcus's shoulder and whispered that this was just the beginning. The summer intensive, the class transfer, the growing recognition all pointed toward a bright future if Marcus continued to stay true to his art. Marcus's first day in the advanced piano class felt like stepping into a different world. The classroom was spacious and filled with natural light, with several practice pianos lining the walls and a magnificent concert grand in the center. The other students were serious musicians, many planning to pursue professional careers or conservatory education. They regarded Marcus with curiosity mixed with respect, having heard about his youth orchestra performance and the controversy surrounding his delayed placement. Dr. Rosewood taught the advanced class personally, and her teaching style challenged Marcus in ways he had not experienced before. She pushed him to articulate his interpretive choices, to understand the historical context of pieces, and to develop a personal artistic philosophy. The work was demanding but exhilarating. For the first time at Westbridge, Marcus felt genuinely engaged with his education. Preston was also in the class, and his attitude toward Marcus had become more complex. He no longer made openly dismissive comments, but his competitive nature drove him to practice harder, as if Marcus's presence was a challenge to his position as the class's top student. Their rivalry became productive rather than destructive, pushing both of them to improve. Stephanie's transformation was perhaps more dramatic than Marcus's class transfer. Free from the pressure to perform pieces chosen by others, she began exploring music that genuinely moved her. She discovered contemporary composers whose work resonated with her experiences, and her playing developed an emotional authenticity that had been missing before. Teachers who had known her for years commented on the change, noting that she finally seemed to be playing for herself rather than for approval. The winter showcase arrived with its usual fanfare. Marcus attended as an audience member, sitting with his mother who had taken time off work to come. The performances were technically proficient and well-prepared, exactly what everyone expected from Westbridge students. But few pieces had the emotional depth or artistic risk that made performances truly memorable. The audience applauded politely, appreciating the skill while remaining emotionally unmoved. After the showcase, several donors and alumni approached Dr. Rosewood to ask about the talented student they had heard about from the youth orchestra concert. They wanted to know why Marcus had not performed in the showcase. Dr. Rosewood's carefully diplomatic response could not hide her frustration with the decision. Some donors made pointed comments to Headmaster Pemberton about the importance of recognizing merit, conversations that clearly made him uncomfortable. The spring semester brought new opportunities. The youth orchestra director made good on his promise to feature Marcus as a soloist. This time, Marcus would perform a complete piano concerto with full orchestral accompaniment, a significant step up from his solo performances. The preparation was intense, requiring him to balance Westbridge's demanding curriculum with extensive rehearsals with the orchestra. Dr. Rosewood arranged for Marcus to study the concerto with a renowned pianist who taught at the nearby university. The lessons were invaluable, teaching Marcus not just about the notes but about communicating with an orchestra, about timing, and balance, about the unique challenges of concerto performance. The professor was impressed by Marcus's natural musicality and quick learning, telling Dr. Rosewood that Marcus had the potential for a truly exceptional career. At Westbridge, Marcus had become a symbol of something larger than himself: scholarship. Students from other programs approached him to share their own experiences with discrimination and unfair treatment. They formed an informal support network, advocating for policy changes and better treatment of students from diverse backgrounds. Marcus found himself in a leadership role he had not sought but felt obligated to embrace. Stephanie joined these efforts, using her position and family connections strategically. She spoke at board meetings about the importance of genuine diversity rather than tokenism. Her willingness to challenge her father and other powerful donors from within the system made her advocacy particularly effective. The friendship between Marcus and Stephanie, once seen as unusual, became a model for the kind of cross-cultural connection the Academy claimed to value but rarely achieved. The concerto performance approached quickly. Marcus practiced until his fingers ached, working through every challenging passage until it felt natural. The piece told a story through music, a dialogue between soloist and orchestra that required perfect communication and timing. During rehearsals, Marcus discovered the joy of collaborative performance, the way his playing could inspire the orchestra, and how their sound supported his solo lines. The night of the performance, the concert hall was packed. Word had spread through the music community about the talented young pianist, and many came out of curiosity to see if the earlier praise was justified. Marcus's mother sat in the front row again, this time accompanied by Dr. Rosewood and several Westbridge faculty members. Stephanie was there with some classmates, having organized a group to support Marcus. Backstage, Marcus felt surprisingly calm. The nervousness that had plagued him before his first youth orchestra performance was replaced by focused determination. He had prepared thoroughly, and now he simply needed to trust his abilities and connect with the music. When the orchestra director called him to the stage, Marcus walked out with confidence, acknowledging the audience's welcoming applause before taking his place at the piano. The opening orchestral introduction gave Marcus time to breathe and center himself. When his entrance arrived, his fingers found the keys with perfect precision. The concerto unfolded like a conversation, Marcus's solo lines interweaving with the orchestra's responses. He played with technical mastery but also with the emotional depth that had become his signature, making the audience feel every nuance of the music's story. The challenging passages that had worried him during practice flowed smoothly. The cadenza, a solo section where the orchestra dropped out and Marcus played alone, showcased his virtuosity without sacrificing musicality. He could feel the audience leaning forward, completely engaged with his performance. This was what music was meant to be, a direct emotional communication that transcended words or social barriers. The final movement built to a triumphant conclusion, Marcus and the orchestra perfectly unified in the closing passages. As the last chord resonated through the hall, there was a moment of stunned silence. Then the audience erupted, the applause overwhelming. People jumped to their feet immediately, not the gradual standing ovation of polite appreciation, but an instant recognition of something extraordinary. Marcus stood and bowed, his heart racing with joy and relief. He gestured toward the orchestra, acknowledging their essential role in the performance. The director shook his hand enthusiastically, whispering that it was one of the finest concerto performances he had conducted with the youth orchestra. The applause continued, wave after wave, until Marcus had bowed multiple times and the house lights finally came up. Backstage was chaos in the best possible way. His mother hugged him tightly, unable to speak through her tears. Dr. Rosewood introduced him to even more influential people in the music world, including representatives from conservatories and summer festivals. They pressed business cards into his hands, making offers and expressing interest in following his career development. The attention was overwhelming but validating. Among the well-wishers, Headmaster Pemberton appeared unexpectedly. Marcus tensed, unsure what to expect. But Pemberton's expression was carefully neutral, as he offered congratulations on a fine performance. The words were minimal and lacked genuine warmth, but they represented a kind of acknowledgement. Marcus thanked him politely, knowing this was as close to an apology as Pemberton would ever offer. The following week, Westbridge Academy held an unexpected assembly. Pemberton announced a review of scholarship programs and student support services, using carefully chosen language that made the changes sound like planned improvements rather than responses to criticism. Dr. Rosewood caught Marcus's eye from across the auditorium. her slight smile suggesting she knew better but was pleased with the outcome regardless. More significantly, Pemberton announced that Marcus Williams would represent Westbridge Academy at the upcoming regional student competition, a prestigious event that could lead to national recognition. The assembly broke into surprised applause. Preston looked shocked, while others seemed pleased that Marcus was finally receiving official academy support. Marcus accepted the announcement with grace, though he knew the decision was motivated more by external pressure than genuine change of heart. In the weeks that followed, Marcus prepared for the competition while maintaining his coursework and continuing his practice partnership with Stephanie. Their friendship had deepened into something neither had expected, a genuine connection that challenged both of them to grow not just as musicians but as people. They spent hours discussing music, life, and the changes they wanted to see at Westbridge. The summer intensive program accepted Marcus's application officially, along with several other prestigious opportunities that had emerged from his performances. His future was taking shape in ways he could not have imagined when he first walked through Westbridge's gates feeling small and unwelcome.